My character was a trickster slash bastard type. I was explicit in stating that I wanted to use invisibility and invisible mage hand to pull pranks on NPCs. 4 sessions in, the DM says, I'm banning all invisibility and every NPC has a passive perception of 24 plus. Okay, the DM never explicitly stated that every NPC had that high of a perception, but if I ever tried to steal or sneak, she would always just have the NPC see me. The worst offender was when I got a natural 20 on a sleight of hand check for a total of 32, but the barkeep, who was secretly the leader of an espionage group, still spotted me. For the record, DM always used passive perception, so she was never rolling. That's what she used when she had Thief Steal from us as well, so it wasn't just constant bad luck plaguing me. It was just the DM not wanting me to be a married trickster, I guess. I've seen people nerf rogues directly in these horror stories, but a DM just going, all NPCs have 100% rogue immunity, might be taking it a little farther than normal. Hello, just placing some horror stories here so that they can be buried within these unsacred halls. So to begin, I would like to preface that I don't have anything against the players personally, so in that vein, I'm just going to list everyone by their class. So I came into the campaign that was already in motion. I was picking up since the other option had bailed, and so I was fitted into this one. The setting of the game was not Japan, totally not Japan, that was on the cusp of a civil war due to the emperor going off the deep end. My character in this story was supposed to be a human who was cursed to be a Yanti due to killing a snake for watching her dance. I was trying to keep it more fairy tale, myth type of category for the DM to play with. I got into the game, and upon the very first session, my character was cured of her curse by the DM NPC's Kitsune cleric. So whatever plotline of redemption or lesson to be learned was completely voided in favor of getting a guide through territory. Neat. Now the party consisted of the following. Cleric, a perpetually whiny priestess who throughout the entire time I was there was always bemoaning the fact that she was chosen by a god against her will. Now this is fine on paper, but she would always retreat to that same exact ground. She'd never, ever shut up about that same thing. Oh, I couldn't save everyone, or, oh, why was I given this ability? She constantly repeated the same character arc over and over and never stopped till the end. What's worse is that she had main character syndrome. She was in love with another DMPC who could slash everyone within an 80 feet radius as a regular attack and had legendary actions which made him basically untouchable by any proper melee. She adopted a demon, which was also fine, except that she wouldn't let anyone try to kill the other demons that looked like it. The demon was old enough to be her mother, and she refused to let the demon fight people, despite the fact that the demon needed people's blood to survive, which means the party had to pitch in to sustain it. Next, we have Sorcerer, who I think is arguably worse. She played a custom Oni character, who could levitate at will, and her character was flippy-floppy. Her entire deal is that she hated violence, yet still engaged in it with no explanation as to why, and she wanted to help rebuild her village. Now, Oni-related stuff aside, she would also flop back to being a dumb himbo type of personality, where she would be dumb and not understand things, yet understands them when it related to her interests. Out of character, she was always the most standoffish, as when I made a joke about her character name, it literally translates to white darkness or light darkness, she thought that I was personally attacking her. Following this, we had Druid. He didn't start out as a druid, but it's better for naming conventions. Druid was extremely whiny both in character and out of character. He whined when he got hit by the DMPCs in a mock fight. He whined when his spells failed because the creature rolled high. He whined whenever he didn't get his awesome moment and would sulk for a few minutes, even once leaving a session without warning. Next was the fighter who, while following underneath the same wing of shonen mentality, they at least used their speeches sparingly, such as when they needed to talk down a demon since cleric didn't want to kill it. Finally, that leaves the rogue, who I really can't tell what his personality or stakes were, as he was just sort of there. He didn't really have much plot going for him, and sometimes I wondered if he was even playing. Now, we were sneaking through a providence in order to rescue Cleric's mom, who was apparently kidnapped because reasons, my character was designed to be a sly femme fatale type whose purpose wasn't pure combat but to redirect and charm out the opposition. Her spells were suited to more manipulation and subtlety. This was only ever used once, which was promptly never used again to get past a guard outpost, and that's it. Even when we came upon the group escorting the woman, despite my abilities of stealth and having our rogue with us, we resort to straight-on ambushing them, with the only misdirection being a horse to direct gunfire. So we saved the mom and the princess that she was accompanying only to have the sudden reveal of gasp, Cleric's friend, who was a shapeshifter. From out of nowhere, might I add, after we found and revived the dead corpse of Cleric's other friend. So this shapeshifter gave a speech about how cruel it was for there to be gods, why can't we have god powers, etc. It felt like something out of a cheesy wannabe anime because right after that, she said they were forced to fight and used her god juice. We fight the shapeshifter before the gods themselves strike the shapeshifter down, which was immediately made moot as the cleric revived them right after the gods killed them, sobbing about it, of course, which caused the gods to be okay with the whole situation. It's from here that we learn the entire war was orchestrated by a shadow council and that the emperor was merely a puppet in all this. We bring this information back to the cities that were preparing to go to war, only for them to disregard it entirely and go to war anyway, despite physical evidence and testimony by one of these shadow council members. From here, we were given a choice, quote-unquote, either be part of the war or just go our own way. Of course, it was obviously going to be join the war effort, as 4 out of 6 of the party members were involved in some way, Cleric having their hubby be in the war, Rogue just doing assassin things, Sorcerer being MMX8X, and the Fighter at least having an okay reason to join. It was at this point I decided to retire my Yanti that was no longer Yanti. She was basically useless because it was going towards a full combat. She had no reason to stick around, and no one wanted to interact with her anyway. The height of her interaction was at a bar where she was scolded for using her charm abilities by the cleric and told she was a bad person by the sorcerer, whom she silenced using silence. Mind you, the conversation was supposed to be peaceful, but the two kept trying to hammer their virtues aggressively, and I could tell it was getting heated, so I tried to make everyone cool off by the silence is golden rule, which just caused them to get more angry despite telling them that this conversation was only escalating. Now we enter into my new character, who we will call Bonk. She was a barbarian monk who was a bioweapon designed for all-terrain combat, whose entire purpose in life was to hunt down the one who created her. Unfortunately, this was not explored nor questioned, as the party just accepted her despite giving a brutal opening of showing more animalistic nature by dragging an animal corpse in her mouth. I know that it's not the most social way, but she was supposed to be reserved, and I thought that there would be some natural curiosity if not caution around her. Nope. She immediately just gets accepted, and they just send over a boat to the new war zone. Getting to the tower was fine. It was in the tower when it turned to the worst. The Emperor, who lived in this tower I assume, was inside the throne room with his undead demon slayer knockoffs. So of course, he dies immediately since the sorcerer can just cast Storm Sphere. Good job, Demon Slayer Secret Service. So the head Demon Slayer, whom we faced before, had just frightened us and I had gotten out of my fear. So naturally, in Bonk's eyes, this threat was enough in order for her to induce my character's pseudo-rage, forcing her body to contort as she grew her bestial features, and was supposed to be a huge reveal that she was a Path of the Beast barbarian. She had only used monk abilities so far. The moment was quickly dashed, however, as she only needed to use one punch to defeat the guy. However, since she was a primal rage type of mind, she continued to beat down the bones of this undead demon slayer. Of course, this was ignored as the DM described the bones being reformed, despite my character beating on its body and combat essentially being over. The DMPC Kitsune, who I learned here had 4D hit dice due to an AoE aura that dealt damage based on hit dice, and she was most likely a level 40 character, wanted everyone to clear out of the room while waving her death flag, so a wave of force came and the bones of the undead pushed everyone back. The problem was, I was on the other side of the room because I was trying to flank. So not only does my character's actions get ignored, but she gets hand-waved by the cleric's DMPC boy toy. Right after she got hand-waved, the room exploded, and you'd think, gee, guess the kitsune is dead now, right? Wrong, my friend. Not only did the DMPC kitsune survive 40 D8 points of damage, an explosion, and being cut through the stomach along with falling from 200 stories, she lived along with the undead demon slayer too. Now remember when I mentioned that my character was looking for her creator, the one arguably responsible for the creation of her entire race? Well, it just so happened he was in the same city that we were attacking. He was also the one to explain to us how to kill the undead demon slayer that should be dead right now because the DM thought we were bringing this civilian with us on a magic broom, with the DMPC kitsune being able to figure out how to kill the guy whose motivations were basically flames of vengeance. So of course, my character Bonk decides to take this scientist to safety before she finally gets to, murder the guy in revenge, all within less than 1 day of meeting the party. This is the same problem that I have with the Auntie. She's given her objective and had no reason to grow as a person. No one talked to her. She accepted herself as a weapon, and so there was no reason for there to be any growth at all. Not to mention that this guy was super important for essentially making the Simic hybrids. You'd think that he'd have some kind of backup system or security since he's a high-profile target. Nope. The dude has no defense or backup plans or anything until I decide to leave the campaign. So you'd think that with the Emperor dead, and the Shadow Council being exposed for being behind everything, and essentially having the Shadow Council's capital, you'd think the war would be over. Except the war continued for 8 months, despite us being readily available and having some of the most broken DMPCs to grace the planet while controlling the bad guy's capital. So after we faced nothing personal kid assassins, who we were supposed to sympathize with despite encountering one in the middle of nowhere, we were told that there was a wizard who could control demons and Oni with his flute. 8 months in, I might add into the war that should have been over within a month or two. We don't even know why this war is even continuing, nor what the Empire's stance is outside of that they were evil by proxy. All of this lore was presented by 2 succubi making manga of our exploits. Naturally, we don't care about any of this. We don't care about this wizard with his magic Oni flute. However, the DM managed to railroad us into it by getting his Samurai Tabaxi DMPC to mention that this guy was a high-profile target and that in order to win the war that should have been over, we needed to take him down. What was the reason for continuing the war and fighting? Still, nobody knows. I'm not even sure the wizard himself knows. In any case, we managed to make our way up the tower and eventually come across the most frustrating mechanic known to man. The DM said they were like Pokemon transporters, which was completely false, since in Pokemon they're fixed, but here they're random. So we were split up since teleportation circles kept displacing us as we faced the wizard. The wizard being able to move through walls found our rogue and immediately just power word killed them, with us being level 10 by the way. My barbarian Bonk was barely over 100 hit points with a tough feat, so of course the rogue instantly dies. Cue cleric crying again for 5 whole minutes after finding his body before just rezzing the rogue. So I tried to head off the wizard who could walk through walls using my fast movement speed, while everyone else tries to use Dispel Magic and reaction attacks to try to hit him. This led to 30 in real life minutes of just running around as we basically had to wait for the druid to dispel before he could do anything with the wizard running away. I realized I could have joined everyone else waiting for this dispel to pop off, but I had the movement speed to keep up with the teleports and I thought I could cut down the cat and mouse chase or stop any surprise effects. It's about here that I stop having fun. Here? Damn. You have an interesting taste, my friend. There was no interaction that wasn't the cleric's shonen plot. The druid was still whiny as he also had no reason in character to continue, and sorcerer was still being a himbo that immediately flipped if it didn't align with her values. Everything was melodramatic or played so straight that the characters felt more like sock puppets for us to use. It didn't help either that the DM threatened to cancel the game that was apparently nearly finished anyway because he got a headache during one session. So talking with the DM, I expressed that I was no longer having fun and wanted out. But I didn't want which I expected this from the DM by the way, for Bonk to suddenly disappear or just wander off. If she was going to die, she was going to go out on her own terms. So I managed to get the DM to revive the dead scientist and implant Bonk with a deadly infection, and if Bonk was left alive, the infection would grow and kill thousands. This meant the cleric couldn't revive her and actually had to face someone dying, for real for once. I met up with Fighter and they agreed to have a fight to the death where Fighter and Bonk ended it out on their own terms. Bonk gave Fighter a good fight, but their rage yielded to cold damage from a cantrip infused greatsword. Bonk gave one last final statement, finally getting the character development that she should have gotten before she died, and left character development for the Fighter. The plotline she left behind was entrusted to the twin succubi that apparently the DM wanted to end the war by fighting a giant demon who just showed up for no rhyme or reason. But it was finally over. I could leave, and Bonk was laid to rest. I still stuck around on the server since it was the end of the campaign, and I did want to see where it would go, and if the DM would change after I said my piece to them. The end resulted in a massive demon fight, where there were no true stakes, and the DMPCs sticking to the back despite being healthy and winning. The epilogue included, amongst other things, the royal guard of the Emperor, never seen until now despite their Emperor getting murdered, staging some sort of coup because the group defeated the giant demon. Cleric never resolved why she was chosen by a god and just banged the DMPC until the end of time. Deus Ex Druid wanted to marry Druid? Is that a typo or something? I don't know. Doesn't matter. And as expected, the scientist plot was resolved off-screen by Succubi and Fighter. There was talk of a sequel, but I was not interested. I figured while the characters would be different and potentially better, the plot would still be the sequential railroad that it was. I still kept in contact with the Fighter, as he was a pretty cool guy, and I even helped him out with the lore and logic of his own campaign. There are tons of issues in the story. You have spotlight hogging, you have main character syndrome, you have railroading, all of which we've talked about extensively, but something that we haven't talked about much is how to resolve those issues, and frankly, when the entire group is engaging in it, it's almost impossible to do so. It's hard to resolve these problems. It's hard to convince the group to change what they're doing because, I mean, they're clearly having something going on. So, honestly, the OP did the right thing by just maturely walking out, and I'm glad that their character got some sort of resolution. I will say that if you leave a campaign, do not expect your character to get a clean resolution, because honestly, that's usually not what happens. When a character, or a player more specifically, leaves a campaign, their character usually just gets tossed to the side most of the time. So if you are leaving the campaign, especially if you feel like there's some sort of bad blood, don't leave with the expectation that your character is going to get treated well, because while I wish that were the case, I wish every character got the epic treatment that the OP's character did, and I'm glad that happened, it's just not something that's going to happen often. Remember, your character belongs to you, not to the toxic group that you're leaving. If you guys enjoyed this episode of RPG Horror Stories and want to let me know, then please do leave a like. If you want to see more of my content, then please do subscribe to Crispy's Tavern. And finally, if you want to leave your own stories or thoughts, go down to the comments down below. If you can't think of a comment, leave the comment plot with a question mark to let me know you made it to the end of the video. And that's like, comment, subscribe. I will see you all next time. Farewell.